What happens when a member of the British royal family sits down for what's supposed to be a friendly morning chat and instead unleashes a torrent of accusations that leaves an entire studio speechless? In just 32 seconds, Prince Harry went from welcomed guest to escorted exit, and what triggered his downfall was a single question about accountability that he absolutely could not handle. The View studio audience settled into their seats that morning, expecting the usual lighthearted banter, maybe some discussion about charity work, perhaps a few carefully rehearsed anecdotes about life across the pond. Joy Behar sat at the iconic table, her notes prepared, her questions vetted, ready to give Harry the kind of platform that most publicists dream about. The prince walked out to enthusiastic applause, waving to the crowd with that practiced royal wave, his smile bright and camera ready. Everything seemed perfectly normal. Everything seemed like it would be just another celebrity interview. Joy opened with warmth, welcoming him to the show, thanking him for taking the time to sit down with them. Harry nodded graciously, settling into his chair with an air of casual confidence. The first few minutes played out exactly as expected. They talked about his recent projects, his family, the causes he claimed to care so deeply about. The audience laughed at his jokes. Joy smiled and nodded along. It was all very pleasant, very safe, very predictable. But then Joy did what good journalists do. She asked a real question. "You've spoken a lot about wanting privacy," Joy said, her tone still friendly but now edged with genuine curiosity. "Yet you've also done multiple interviews, a documentary series, a book. How do you reconcile those two things?" The shift in Harry's demeanor was instant. His smile didn't just fade, it evaporated. His shoulders tensed, his eyes narrowed. For a moment, he just stared at her, as if he couldn't quite believe she'd had the audacity to ask something that wasn't completely fawning. "I think that's a bit reductive," Harry said, his voice tight. "You're simplifying a very complex situation." Joy remained calm, professional. "I'm just trying to understand. You made privacy a cornerstone of your public messaging, but you're also very publicly sharing your story. I think viewers are curious about that balance." "The media has tormented my family for generations," Harry shot back, his voice rising slightly. "I have every right to tell my own story, on my own terms. That's not the same as inviting the kind of intrusion we've suffered." "Of course," Joy said, nodding. "But when you share intimate details about private conversations with your family members, doesn't that also invade their privacy?" The question hung in the air like a lit fuse. The audience went quiet. The other hosts exchanged glances. Harry's face flushed red. "That's completely different," he insisted. "I'm sharing my truth. I'm sharing my experience. They've had the entire British press as their mouthpiece for years." Joy kept her composure, her voice steady. "Right. But they haven't written books about private conversations with you. They haven't gone on television to discuss arguments you've had behind closed doors. So I'm asking, genuinely, where's the line?" Harry leaned forward, his jaw clenched. "The line is that I've been lied about. I've been villainized. I've watched my wife be destroyed by a racist institution and a complicit media. So yes, I'm going to defend myself. I'm going to set the record straight. I understand that," Joy said. "And I think a lot of people sympathize with the difficulties you've faced. But some of the criticism you're receiving isn't about whether you have the right to speak out. It's about the way you're doing it. It's about the contradictions." "What contradictions?" Harry demanded, his voice now clearly agitated. "Well, for instance," Joy continued, maintaining her professional tone, "you've talked about wanting to protect your children from the spotlight, which is completely understandable. But you've also brought them into your public narrative. You've shared stories about them, details about their lives. Some people wonder if that's truly protecting them or if it's using them to bolster your own image." That was the moment everything exploded. Harry's face went from flushed to absolutely furious. He sat up rigidly in his chair, pointing his finger at Joy. "How dare you?" he said, his voice shaking with anger. "How dare you suggest that I would use my children? You have no idea what it's like to be in my position. You have no idea what I've sacrificed." Joy didn't back down. "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm telling you what the criticism is. I'm asking you to respond to it." "The criticism is garbage," Harry spat. "It's coming from people who've never lived under the kind of scrutiny I have. People who've never had to worry about their past, family's safety, the way I have. You sit here in your comfortable studio asking me these gotcha questions, And you think you're being some kind of hard-hitting journalist. But you're just doing exactly what the tabloids do. You're twisting my words. You're manufacturing controversy. The audience was completely silent now. The other host looked stunned. Joy remained remarkably calm, her decades of experience clearly showing. "Harry, I haven't twisted anything," she said evenly. "I've asked you straightforward questions about things you've said publicly. If that feels like an attack, maybe that's something to examine." "Don't you dare psychoanalyze me," Harry snapped. "You don't know me. You don't know my life. You're just another talking head who thinks she has all the answers." "I never claimed to have all the answers," Joy replied. "I'm asking questions. That's literally my job. And if you can't handle basic questions about your own public statements, then maybe you need to reconsider doing interviews." Harry stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You know what? I don't need this. I came here thinking I'd have an actual conversation, not an interrogation." "Asking you to explain your own positions isn't an interrogation," Joy said, still seated, still calm. "It's called accountability." "Accountability?" Harry's voice was loud now, echoing through the studio. "You want to talk about accountability? Where's the accountability for the journalists who hounded my mother? Where's the accountability for the palace staff who leaked stories about my wife? Where's the accountability for the institution that protected my brother while throwing me to the wolves?" "Those are all valid concerns," Joy said, "and they deserve to be addressed. But they don't exempt you from being asked about your own choices and contradictions." "There are no contradictions," Harry shouted. The audience gasped. "I am trying to live my life with my family, in peace, while also making sure the truth is known. That's not contradictory. That's survival." Joy stood up now, matching his energy but not his anger. "Harry, I hear you. I understand you've been through trauma. I understand you feel like you've been treated unfairly. But you're a grown man with enormous privilege and resources. You have platforms that most people could never dream of. And with that comes responsibility. It comes with people asking you tough questions. Privilege?" Harry's laugh was bitter, harsh. "You think this is privilege? Being chased by photographers? Having every aspect of my life dissected? Watching my wife contemplate suicide because of the cruelty she faced? That's privilege to you?" "That's not what I said," Joy responded firmly. "The trauma you've experienced is real. The pain is real. But you also have wealth, access, security, opportunities that 99% of the world doesn't have. Both things can be true at the same time." Harry shook, his head violently. "You people are all the same. You pretend to care. You pretend to understand. But the moment someone actually speaks truth to power, the moment someone actually challenges the system, you tear them down. You protect the institution. You protect the status quo." "I'm not protecting anything," Joy said, her voice still remarkably steady. "I'm having a conversation. Or at least I'm trying to. You're the one who's yelling. Because I'm tired." Harry exploded. "I'm tired of being told I'm doing it wrong. I'm tired of being told I'm too much or not enough. I'm tired of people like you sitting in judgment when you have no idea what it's like." "Then help me understand," Joy said, opening her hands in a gesture of invitation. "Sit back down. Let's talk about it. But you can't just expect everyone to accept everything you say without question. That's not how dialogue works." "I don't need dialogue with you," Harry said coldly. "I need respect. I need to be heard, without being attacked." "You haven't been attacked," Joy insisted. "You've been asked questions." "There's a difference." Harry grabbed the microphone off his lapel and threw it onto the table with a sharp clatter. "This is done. I'm done. This whole thing is a setup." "It's not a setup," Joy said, exasperation finally creeping into her voice. "You agreed to come here. You agreed to an interview. Interviews involve questions." "Not these questions," Harry said. "These are designed to make me look bad, to make me seem hypocritical, to undermine everything I'm trying to do." "The only person making you look bad right now is you," Joy said bluntly. "I asked you reasonable questions about public statements you've made. Your reaction is completely out of proportion." Harry turned to face her fully, his expression twisted with anger. "Out of proportion? You have the audacity to tell me what's proportionate? After everything I've lost? After everything I've been through? Your pain doesn't give you a free pass to be unreasonable," Joy said. "It doesn't mean you get to lash out at anyone who challenges you." "I'm not being unreasonable," Harry's voice cracked. "I'm setting boundaries. I'm refusing to be disrespected. Asking you about contradictions in your public messaging isn't disrespect," Joy fired back. It's journalism. If you can't tell the difference, that's a problem. One of the show's producers appeared from offstage, clearly trying to de-escalate the situation. Harry waved him away angrily. Don't touch me. I'm leaving. Fine, Joy said, sitting back down at the table. Leave. But know that this outburst is going to be the story, not whatever message you came here to share. Harry pointed at her again, his hand shaking. You did this. You provoked this. This is on you. I asked you questions, Joy said tiredly. That's all I did. How you responded is entirely on you. You're a bully, Harry accused, his voice venomous. Just like all the rest. You hide behind this veneer of respectability, but you're just a bully with a platform. Joy's expression hardened. I've been called a lot of things in my career, Harry. Bully isn't one that sticks. I've asked politicians, world leaders, and celebrities far more difficult questions than anything I asked you today. Most of them handled it with grace. You're throwing a tantrum because you expected softballs and got actual journalism. Actual journalism? Harry laughed mockingly. This isn't journalism. This is a hit job. This is tabloid garbage dressed up as legitimate media. You don't get to decide what journalism is, Joy said firmly. Especially when you've spent years criticizing media you disagree with while celebrating media that praises you. That's not principle. That's ego. Harry's eyes blazed. You know nothing about my principles, nothing about what drives me, nothing about what I've sacrificed for what I believe in. Then tell me, Joy challenged. Sit down and tell me. Have an actual conversation instead of yelling accusations. I don't owe you anything, Harry said. I don't owe this show anything. I thought you were different. I thought you'd understand. But you're just another cog in the machine. The machine that gave you a national platform to share your views? Joy asked pointedly. That machine? Harry ripped off his lapel entirely, the fabric tearing slightly. I'm leaving. This interview is over. It was over the moment you started yelling, Joy said. But for the record, you're proving every criticism people have of you right now. The entitlement, the victim complex, the inability to handle even mild pushback. Victim complex? Harry's voice went dangerously quiet. My mother died being chased by paparazzi. My wife was driven to the brink of suicide by racist coverage. I've had to leave my entire country to protect my family. And you call that a victim complex? I call your reaction to basic interview questions a victim complex. Joy clarified. Your trauma is real, your pain is real, but you're using it as a shield against any and all criticism, and that's not healthy. It's not fair to the people who care about you, and it's not fair to yourself. Harry stared at her for a long moment, his breathing heavy. You have no right, he finally said, his voice low and intense. No right to tell me what's healthy. No right to analyze me. No right to judge me. I have every right to observe your behavior and comment on it, Joy said. Just like you have every right to write books and do interviews, commenting on your family's behavior. You can't have it both ways. Watch me, Harry said. He turned to the producer. Get me out of here, now. The producer nodded nervously, gesturing toward the exit. Harry started walking, his movements stiff and angry. The audience sat frozen, unsure whether to react. Joy remained at the table, watching him go. Just before reaching the exit, Harry turned back one more time. You'll regret this, he called out to Joy. You'll regret treating me this way. Joy met his eyes steadily. The only thing I regret is that you couldn't have a grown-up conversation. Good luck, Harry. I genuinely hope you find the peace you're looking for. Don't patronize me, Harry spat. I'm not, Joy said simply. I mean it. But peace doesn't come from expecting everyone to agree with you. It comes from being secure enough in yourself to handle disagreement. Harry shook his head one final time, disgust written across his face. Then he walked out, the studio door closing behind him with a heavy thud. The silence that followed was deafening. The audience didn't know whether to applaud or stay quiet. The other hosts looked at each other, clearly shaken. Joy took a deep breath, composed herself, and looked directly at the camera. Well, she said, her voice carefully controlled. That was unexpected. We're going to take a quick break. As the show cut to post, commercial, the weight of what had just happened settled over the studio. A member of the royal family had just had a complete meltdown on live television, all because he'd been asked to explain his own public statements. The entitlement that had been on display was staggering. The inability to handle even gentle questioning revealed something deeply troubling about someone who had positioned himself as a champion of mental health and open dialogue. Joy sat at the table during the commercial break, her hands folded, her expression thoughtful. A production assistant approached carefully, asking if she was okay. She nodded, giving a small smile. "I'm fine," she said. "I've handled worse than a prince with hurt feelings." But it wasn't just hurt feelings that had exploded across that stage. It was something much deeper and much more concerning. It was the reaction of someone who had never truly been held accountable, who had spent his entire life surrounded by people who couldn't or wouldn't challenge him. And when finally faced with a professional journalist doing her job, asking fair and relevant questions, he had crumbled. He had lashed out. He had played the victim so hard that he'd become the villain of his own story. The other hosts gathered around Joy during the break, offering support, expressing shock at how quickly things had deteriorated. "You didn't do anything wrong," one of them assured her. "Those were completely reasonable questions." "I know," Joy said quietly. "But he's not used to reasonable questions. He's used to adoration or attacks. He doesn't know how to handle anything in between." When the show came back from commercial, Joy addressed the audience directly. "I want to say something about what just happened," she began. "We invited Prince Harry here today to have a conversation. I prepared thoughtful questions about his public work and his public statements. At no point did I attack him personally. At no point did I ambush him. I asked him to explain positions he has taken publicly, and he responded with anger and accusations." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "I've been doing this job for a long time. I've interviewed people who've been through unimaginable trauma. I've talked to people who've lost everything. And many of them have found ways to discuss their experiences without lashing out at everyone around them. Trauma is real. Pain is real. But it doesn't excuse behavior like what we just witnessed." The audience applauded, and Joy continued. "I hope Prince Harry finds the help and support he needs. I genuinely do. But I also hope he learns that being famous, being royal, being wounded, none of those things exempt you from basic standards of decency and self-control. If you're going to put yourself in the public eye, if you're going to share your story, you have to be prepared for people to ask questions about that story. That's not persecution. That's not bullying. That's just how public discourse works." She looked directly at the camera, her expression serious but not unkind. "And to our viewers, I want to say this. It's okay to have sympathy for someone's struggles while also holding them accountable for their actions. Those two things aren't mutually exclusive. You can acknowledge someone's pain while also recognizing when they're being unreasonable. Compassion doesn't mean accepting bad behavior. It means hoping people will grow and do better." The show moved on to other segments, but the energy in the studio remained charged. The production team was already fielding calls from news outlets wanting statements. Social media was exploding with reactions. Video clips of the confrontation were being shared thousands of times per minute. And through it all, Joy remained professional, continuing with the show, demonstrating the kind of grace under pressure that Harry had so spectacularly failed to display. What made the whole incident so revealing was the contrast. Joy, faced with accusations and anger, had remained calm and measured. She'd defended her questions without getting defensive. She'd acknowledged Harry's pain while still holding firm on her responsibilities as a journalist. Harry, meanwhile, had responded to mild questioning with fury and contempt. He'd accused her of things she hadn't done. He'd tried to intimidate her with his status and his suffering. And when none of that worked, he'd stormed off like a child denied a toy. The audience that had welcomed him with such warmth watched him leave with a mixture of shock and disappointment. They'd wanted to like him. They'd wanted to hear his perspective. But what they'd witnessed instead was someone so wrapped up in his own narrative that he couldn't tolerate even the gentlest challenge to it. Someone so convinced of his own righteousness that any question felt like an attack. Someone so accustomed to deference that basic accountability felt like persecution. Joy finished the show with her usual professionalism, thanking the audience, previewing the next day's topics. But everyone in that studio knew they'd witnessed something significant. Not just a celebrity meltdown, but a revealing glimpse into the mindset of someone who'd spent years positioning himself as a victim while demonstrating all the behaviors of someone drunk on unearned moral authority. The entitled prince had come to the view expecting validation. He'd expected sympathetic nods and softball questions. He'd expected to be treated as brave for sharing his story, as heroic for speaking his truth. What he got instead was a professional journalist who treated him like any other guest, who asked him to defend his positions, who refused to be intimidated by his title or his anger. And he absolutely could not handle it. That's what made the whole incident so perfect in its irony. Harry had spent so much time criticizing the media, criticizing the institution, criticizing everyone who'd ever questioned him. But when faced with actual questions, fair questions, relevant questions, he fell apart completely. He proved every criticism people had been making about him. He showed the world exactly who he was beneath the carefully crafted public image. Joy Behar, veteran journalist and talk show host, had simply done her job. She'd asked questions. She'd followed up. She'd refused to let contradictions slide. And for that, she'd been called a bully, accused of running a hit job, and had to watch a grown man throw a tantrum on her stage. But she'd handled it with class. She'd stayed calm. She'd stayed professional. She'd demonstrated what real strength looks like, what real grace under pressure looks like. Not yelling and pointing fingers, not storming off and making threats, just quiet confidence and unwavering professionalism. The story wasn't really about Joy at all. She was just doing what she always did. The story was about Harry, about his complete inability to function in a situation where he wasn't being coddled or praised, about how quickly his facade crumbled when faced with actual scrutiny, about how someone who claimed to want honest dialogue reacted with hostility the moment that dialogue didn't go his way. As the studio emptied out after the show, crew members gathered in small groups, discussing what they'd witnessed. Some felt bad for Harry, thought maybe the questions had been too tough, but most recognized what had really happened. A spoiled, entitled man had been treated like everyone else for perhaps the first time in his life, and he'd responded with exactly the kind of behavior you'd expect from someone who'd never learned to handle criticism. Joy packed up her notes, chatted briefly with her co-hosts, and prepared to leave. She knew the next few days would be intense, that she'd probably face some backlash from Harry's supporters, but she also knew she'd done nothing wrong. She'd asked fair questions. She'd given him every opportunity to answer, thoughtfully. His reaction was his choice, his responsibility, and that was the final lesson of the whole ugly incident. We're all responsible for how we respond to challenges, to questions, to moments that make us uncomfortable. Harry had chosen anger and accusations. He'd chosen to play the victim even as he acted like a bully. He'd chosen to walk away rather than engage honestly. Joy had chosen professionalism, patience, and principle. She'd chosen to do her job even when it would have been easier to back down. She'd chosen to stand firm even when faced with royal fury. The contrast couldn't have been clearer, and that contrast told viewers everything they needed to know about both of them.